Fala galera, beleza com vocês? Eu tô aqui mais uma vez, estou de volta, né, para mais um vídeo. Esse vídeo é um vídeo importante, então também tá comigo o Rubinho, que é nosso jornalista, e a gente também convidou o Owen. O Owen é o cônsul da Irlanda lá no Brasil, então ele é a pessoa mais adequada para conversar com a gente sobre esse tópico que é muito importante, que é sobre essas novas regras, né? O que está acontecendo com um brasileiro que quer vir para a Irlanda estudar, vai mudar, vai ter que pagar mais, não vai? Vamos ouvir direto da fonte. Então, a gente vai fazer essa entrevista em inglês. A gente vai colocar a legenda para vocês, não se preocupem. So, Owen and Rubinho, thank you so much for being here. I know it's probably like a super busy schedule, but we got some super important burning questions that are, popping around, like, visa costs and so on. So we'd love to hear from you as the expert in this subject. Rubinho, if you want to get started, go for it.
So, hello, Owen. It's a pleasure to meet you at this interview. And I'm glad that we can talk about these changes in Ireland that can affect Brazilians who want to come to the country soon. And I hope that we can clarify lots of questions today here. In January 2021, there were changes made to the visa requirements for those looking to travel to Ireland. And what does it mean? And what is the effect now for Brazilians who want to travel to Ireland?
Thanks, Rubinho, and thanks, Edu. First of all, thank you both for the opportunity, I guess, to talk with you and to talk to many Brazilians, both in Dublin and in Brazil. As Edu said, I arrived as Consul General last August, right in the middle of this pandemic and right in the middle of the changing landscape as it is in terms of international travel. So I guess I'm well placed to talk about it, but thank you so much for the opportunity. But to your question, Rubinho, yeah, like you said, on the 27th of January, the Irish government, obviously in response to the growing concerns around the pandemic, decided to change the visa requirements for certain countries that were previously non-visa required. Brazil was one of those countries. And I think it's important to note that Brazil is one of a few countries and not just on its own in this sense. The Ireland and Brazil relationship is strong and is growing every year, as we see from the many numbers of Brazilians who travel to Ireland before COVID and will travel again in the future, of which I have no doubt. But I think also just at the outset, if I can, Rubinho, to say that this is clearly, this is a temporary measure and it's purely for health reasons and for the health situation, not just here in Ireland, but across the world, I guess. We're all trying to do our bit to ensure that the COVID pandemic is sort of challenged and sort of pushed back. So I guess what it means directly for Brazilians, and it's something that may be of interest, is that all Brazilian citizens, wherever you're located around the world, whether you're in Brazil, whether you're in New Zealand, whether you're in America, you will require a visa to travel to Ireland. Of course, it's not as easy as just applying for a visa. It's only visa applications where there's a really legitimate emergency and a priority reason. And we'll talk about maybe a bit later about the various categories of what that emergency or priority cases involves, again, especially given today's most recent announcement by the government in relation to certain applications or certain categories of visas.
Got it. That's a fair point, Owen. I kind of want to, on that point, I know that one of the biggest concerns is around the financial support. So on that specific issue for visa applicants from Brazil, why did it change? And I know you kind of alluded to that already, but why did it really change and how does it affect Brazilian students right now?
So the reason it changed, I guess, to be very, very straight and to the point, is that for any visa required country, you need to prove or need to provide evidence of up to €7,000 where you're staying in Ireland to do a course or to come for other reasons where it's over 6 months. I think it needs to be seen in terms of the whole globe as opposed to just Brazil. This isn't because of Brazil. This is because it's a visa requirement and there's no flexibility in that requirement, I guess. So it applies to Brazil plus every other visa required country. But I think, in terms of the situation for those coming to Brazil for study reasons, I guess, for the most part, they can apply. They have to show the evidence of the 7,000. And I think the one thing for me, and if I can give advice to our listeners, is that it's really imperative that you, when you're applying for this visa, show sort of evidence and sort of very strong evidence that you have the ability to cover 7,000 plus the fees for the first year of your studies and for any subsequent year after that. I think, and we've seen and you've read on the INIS website that if you do secure funding from elsewhere, from another source, such as a student loan or maybe the sale of some asset, you will need to demonstrate this with documentary evidence. And like I said, I think in previous conversations, it's not a case that we're trying to catch anybody out here. We're just trying to make sure that you have the information and that we can help you with that, and that you're able to explain why, I guess, certain money is in one's account. But like I said, not just for Brazilians, this is for everybody who's looking to come to Ireland on a student visa, where it's visa required. That, I guess, just to mention, and it is still the case for students where it's 6 months, less than 6 months, it is, I think it's €500 a month, or max up to a maximum of 3,000. But I guess for now, because we're not processing visas for English language, etc., or for short stay as such, that doesn't really apply in this current sort of climate. But it may well do going into the future. But for the moment, it doesn't really sort of apply to what we're trying to talk about here.
Okay. So kind of like on that topic, so let's say Brazilians who are now coming to study in an Irish college, so like a degree, master's, or like third level courses in the next academic year, which means from September, they are already able to apply for a visa and they need to present the financial requirement of €7,000. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will come as positive news, is that, yes, as you say, we are accepting applications at the moment for those due to come to Ireland or hoping to come to Ireland to study in higher level or third level education. I think it's important to note that that these visas are accepted by both the consulate and the embassy. And when you do your visa application online, it may say send your visa application to Brasilia. I would say where you're located closer to Sao Paulo, send it to the consulate. We really want to try and help process these as quickly as possible in terms of the current constraints. But just one other point, I think that is really important. We're encouraging students, one, to apply now if they're looking to come to Ireland in September, and two, to apply for a multi-entry visa. So the reason for this is that it will ensure that, given the delays with the IRP process or the residence permit process, that if you do come to Ireland, you will then get to stay until minimum 31st of January 2022. Usually that was a 3-month sort of stamp put onto your visa and put onto your passport when you arrived in Ireland, but that now has been extended to the 31st of January 2022. So that should give plenty of time for a student to go to Burkey or to go to their local immigration office to apply for the relevant IOP card, I guess the stamp due for many in terms of the student space. But I think that's a really sort of important sort of change, because the 3 months would be limiting in terms of trying to get sort of IOP cards, etc., approved. So I think it's a case that we're open for applications. We're open for students in the third level space. We're looking forward to receiving them. While the processing times will vary in terms of how quickly we can get them out or back to students, I would just say to follow very carefully the documentation required on INIS, I guess, in terms of the application list and document list, but also be a bit patient with us in the consulate and the embassy, because there's a lot happening, there's a lot coming in. We're dealing with queries on this every day. And I can assure you that yours is as important as the others. And while at the moment we are looking to turn the applications around very quickly, there is a possibility that it could take up to 8 weeks. So I urge you, if you're looking to go to Ireland to take up a course in September, submit your application now.
Right. Just to clarify these questions between students, college students and English students, if Ireland will start to issue student visas for English students, like 25-week English course, that's the 8-month visa, and if Brazil is still be on the list of countries that require the visa to come to Ireland, does it mean that they will need to present a financial requirement of 7,000 euro too?
Thanks, Rubinho. I think, I guess that's the question everybody's wondering. The numbers and the really great numbers that come from Brazil every year to study English. I guess nobody likes an if question, but if it is a case that Brazil is still visa required come the opening up of the English language space, yes is the answer. But again, I must reiterate that this is absolutely a temporary measure. And I am hopeful, and we're all hopeful, that when the English language space opens up, that this measure will no longer be in place. So hopefully we won't have to deal with those issues for English language students. But to answer the question in terms of an if, yes, if it is the case that visas are still required, the applicant will require to demonstrate evidence of 7,000 euros in the same way as a third level or higher level student will.
Yeah, and this the government order imposed these new visa requirements, and the last update in his website, they say that this will change. The date what this could change is until further notice. So, is it possible that this situation can be permanent? When do you think that Ireland will remove Brazil from this list?
Again, it's hard to give anybody a specific date, and I won't try to give you a specific date. But what I will say is that the Department of Foreign Affairs, together with the Department of Justice, are looking to have this as a temporary measure for the shorter term as opposed to the longer term. We will be, of course, like every announcement by government during this time, we will be led by the experts in terms of the health situation and how that's changing, not just in Ireland but in other countries too. And that will dictate, I guess. So the vaccine programs are slowly but surely improving and getting along a little bit quicker. So as that happens and that improves even more, I would be hopeful that this temporary measure will be in place for not too much longer. But we're not talking about this as anything more than a temporary measure. And I said it already, I guess, but just to reiterate, that is the case. If anybody has any doubts on that, I am happy to be on the record saying this is a temporary measure.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Owen. Thanks for that. I have a kind of like final question, and then obviously if you want to add comments to that. There's a situation where we know there are qualified Brazilians who apply for jobs, like what we call like critical skills jobs, and there's obviously a different kind of permission for that, which is the kind of work permission. It's a different visa stamp and so on. For cases like that, if someone gets, a work permission, like critical skill visa, what kind of like requirements do they have to go through? And what are the other situations where, maybe outside of critical skills, where they could essentially ask for a visa to be processed and approved so they can come to Ireland at the moment, like right now?
No, and another very good and relevant question. I guess to start with, we will have all seen, or by the end of this conversation, we will all know that there was an update to this sort of issue, I guess, today at lunchtime. And I guess that impacts on the Brazil space as it does on other countries. And just to be very clear, that what we're accepting now that we weren't accepting yesterday is that we're accepting long stay visa applications for people traveling with work permits. So we're accepting all of those applications in the embassy and in the consulate. We're also accepting, which I think is a really important one, and I know it's an issue that has been probably raised by your own sort of followers as much as it has by our own, in terms of the reunification, the joining up with your family. So we're also accepting now from today all long stay visa applications for all joint family applications. And I think none of us wants to be away from loved ones at any stage, but definitely not during challenging times such as the one we are. So I can assure you that the consulate and the embassy are very much aware of this, very much empathetic towards it, and we will look to try and process those applications in a manner that will ensure people get back to their families sooner rather than later. And also just in terms of those who will be involved from an EU free movement space and the directive that will be relevant, we're also accepting all long stay visa applications for that category of traveller. And I think that's big changes announced today. And it will see quite a lot of Brazilians sort of in a position to enter Ireland sooner rather than later. on the back of the visa process. Again, like I said earlier, I think it's not a foregone conclusion that visa applications will be approved. It's a case that you have to provide all the documentation, and also to reiterate that a visa only grants you permission to enter the country. You will land in Dublin Airport, and you will be met by immigration, and they will also then have a part to play in the process in terms of stamping your passport with what's called a landing stamp, I guess. And then obviously you will work with Burkey to get the relevant residence permit. But also just to mention on that, in terms of when one sort of arrives at Dublin Airport, I can assure you that the immigration officers want to help you. They're not there to trick you or to sort of to put you off. They really want to help you. But I just say to everybody, please just have the documentation and have it done. And don't be afraid to ask us a question about that. And I'm happy to answer any questions. If you want to do a Q&A one night, I'm happy to take that. And we can do that live. It's about helping people to get back to Ireland, to a place that we all love so well. But if I can just add, and there is one or two other categories that I know people will have questions about, and one being the whole imperative family reason as an emergency. And I think this is one that, that is a really tricky one to deal with, because everybody's interpretation of imperative or emergency may differ. But I guess what we sort of do try to tell people is that really make sure that it is for an emergency scenario. For instance, if it's to join a colleague or a family member for a birthday party or another anniversary, that's not an emergency scenario. If it's a health-related situation and there's an absolute imperative reason for that, that's a reason, that's a good reason. But what I would ask there is that documentation from medical professionals, etc., are given to support the application. Again, we're not trying to stop people from being with their loved ones, but we just have to ensure that it's, I guess, done in a transparent way and in a proper way that ensures ultimately the health and safety of us all. So I just think that's another important point, Just to reiterate, and just to give me 1 or 2 seconds to talk about just the visa processing times, and just to give people a sense of what happens when their visa arrives on the desk in the consulate. So for study visas, they arrive in, they get processed by my colleagues and I, but then we also send them on to Dublin for processing, and the final decision on that is made in Dublin. So the consulate don't make a decision on whether to approve the visa application or not. So that goes to Dublin, and for that reason, it may well take up to 12 weeks for any visa application to be processed. So I think, again, like I said earlier, get them in as soon as possible, especially where you're hoping to arrive in Ireland from September. In terms of the joint family and the work permits, so the work permit visas will be sort of processed in the consulate, and we will process them ourselves up until the final decision. So they won't go to Dublin. So we will hopefully have them turned around in a little bit quicker, between 8 to 12 weeks, but possibly sooner. And we will look to try and do these sooner. And also in terms of joint family, for if you're somebody joining sort of an EU citizen, a Brazilian joining an EU citizen in Ireland, that application will start the process in Dublin, but it will be posted to Ireland for final decision and final approval. So again, that can take up to a couple of months in some cases. But again, I know colleagues and we are trying to turn them around as quick as possible. So I guess just for people to understand that not one application is the same, and not one category is the same, and all of these things require a little bit of back and forth. So like I asked earlier, a little bit of patience and a little bit of understanding, and we will get to your queries, we will get to your issues, and we'll get to getting to the end of the process in terms of the visa. I'm very aware, my own wife is from Belo Horizonte. I'm very aware of the links between Brazil and Ireland, and the growing links all the time. And I can assure you that Ireland is very much sort of in a very strong and healthy relationship with Brazil, and vice versa. I feel it here in São Paulo, and I've always felt it in Ireland. So I can assure you that this temporary measure is just to protect the health of you, of I, I guess, of all of us. And I think that's the most important thing, but I can also just assure you that once open, Ireland will be welcoming all Brazilians back with open arms, and I will also be there at that stage, hopefully, to welcome others back, and some very good friends who are Brazilians. So I guess that's a little bit of a sense of the situation. But one more point, if I can, do, and apologies for taking your time, but I really appreciate the time to discuss this. Obviously, with all of this, the situation remains that if you are coming from Brazil, you will have to do the 14-day quarantine in the hotel, in the mandatory hotel quarantine. You will have to do the PCR test, and you will have to fill out the passenger locator form. So all of those requirements are still in place, and will be in place again until such time as those experts and government decide that they're safe to sort of take back or push to one side. I think if I could just also say where people are traveling to a different country, so they're transiting through, whether it's Frankfurt, whether it's through Amsterdam, just to be very mindful that there might be different restrictions in place where PCR test and the time frames, etc., because people are getting caught on that. But yeah, I think, that covers pretty much most of the main points, but happy to answer any other questions you have now. But also would ask, and if possible, to share with your followers the one or two links that I've sent you that will give you absolute up-to-date information, and also our own Facebook page for the consulate and the embassy is where we also interact, and we're actually receiving quite a lot of emails on that today as a result of today's announcement, and we are trying our best to get back to everybody. So, we're open to communicate, we're open to help, and like I said, if you see it as a good idea, maybe in the future to do a live Q&A, more than happy. We're here to help and here to give you the most accurate information we can, I guess, and that's all we can do.
That's great. That's great, Owen. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for sharing all of these updates. Again, it's super important for us. And we'll all make sure that we have the links that you shared. We're going to put in the description of the video as well. And also, if people have questions, I'll ask them to comment, below the video. So depending on the types of questions, we may do like a news session. And as you said, maybe we can go live. I think that's also a really good idea. You'll probably have to pick a little bit of Portuguese there because people maybe,
no problem.
We need some support in that. But that's good for you too. It's a good practice.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. My Portuguese is coming on very estou aprendendo português, não?
Very good.
Eu falo pouco, não? Mas não, obrigado. Mas outra sort of issue, I guess, just one last point, and I meant to mention it earlier, that we're also hearing that people who are applying online for a visa, they are going into the online application, they're applying, and then they're not doing anything else. They're not sending the hard copy application to the consulate or the embassy. They're thinking it a little bit like the American system, like ESTA, where they're seeing that as, okay, I've filled in that's okay, now I can travel to Ireland. That's not the case. You have to complete the application, and the application is only complete when the embassy or the consulate receive the very thorough hard copy documentation, your passport, and all other requirements. And again, to note, and I think it's actually important, and I should have mentioned it earlier, your passport, your residence permit, anything that you're giving to us as a sort of hard document will not be sent to Ireland at any stage, regardless of the visa application. We will keep that in very much in a secure way in either the consulate or the embassy, so that won't be leaving the country. I think it's an important point because people may be worried about important documents.
Definitely. Yeah, I know some people would be like, what's going to happen to my documentation? But that's fair enough. And again, on New Dublin, we always make sure that we always talk to you guys, to official sources, because we know how hard it is to keep it up to date and to make sure that information is not like misleading. And it's not sometimes because people want to just share like what we call like fake news, but sometimes it's translation. Sometimes people are not fluent and they do not understand exactly what it means. So, on top of like making sure we always follow up with you guys, it's really important for us that we do, sessions like this. So we're super committed as well. And I'm pretty sure you guys are as well. And this is great for the Brazilian community. I'm pretty sure they really appreciate this.
No, thank you so much, too. And like I said at the outset, just thanks for the opportunity. We really appreciate where people like yourself and Rubinho and others want to tell the correct sort of narrative. I want to tell the correct message. So I really appreciate it. And like I said, I'm open to any other sort of idea you have in mind with this. And by the way, other messages, because it's not just all about COVID. There's other things happening in the world and very positive things. So we're nearly there. That's all I'd say. I think it's you too, I think, mentioned that it's just a moment and the moment will pass. So I think we just need to remember these things.
Yes.
That it's just a moment and we will get there. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it to both and yourself. I do. And I look forward to, I guess, talking to you both again and hopefully in person at some stage over the next couple of years.
Hopefully very soon. Hopefully very soon.
I'm sure that this video will answer dozens of questions that we receive every day about this subject, because every day they are asking us, our audience, they are asking us about this situation. So this is very important for us.
Valeu, galera. Obrigado. E se vocês tiverem qualquer dúvida, não esqueçam de deixar nos comentários. Envia para as pessoas que é importante essa informação. Então, compartilha com todo mundo que você puder. Pode mandar mensagem para a gente em direct, pode mandar nos comentários, pode, enfim, postar no Facebook, repostar essa entrevista, porque vai ser importante que mais pessoas que estão pensando em vir para a Irlanda vejam essa informação, tá bom? Então é isso. Obrigado mais uma vez. Obrigado, Eoin. Obrigado, Rubinho.
Obrigado, gente. Obrigado.
Até a próxima.
Tchau, tchau.